Media freedom in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Bosnia and Herzegovina is a country in crisis. It's one of the poorest nations in Europe in terms of GDP per capita. There's widespread corruption, ethnic division, and unemployment. Meanwhile, the judiciary is falling apart with constant corruption scandals, and state institutions continue to serve the interests of political parties rather than the public. And the citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina agree on some of these basic problems, but there's just no political agency to fix them. Research by Dr. Samira Mihanovic Rubik, a senior associate at the Democratization Policy Council, found that 76.8% of citizens believe development to be stagnating. And they also agree that their government is corrupt and not solving these problems. A vast majority, in fact, do not believe authorities are dealing with economic, social, and political problems at every level of their government. And despite a common agreement on these problems, a movement to use government for real positive societal change has yet to materialize. So, what's stopping the people from Bosnia and Herzegovina from driving political change? Well, I think a major roadblock, and perhaps the biggest roadblock, is the lack of a healthy, independent media. So, how did this happen? You have to start with the war that lasted from 1992 to 1995 and the legacy it left on the country. So, the picture at the top is from the Dayton Agreement, which was signed in 1995 among the three leaders of the rivaling factions in the war. Now, according to Dr. Valerie Perry, a senior associate at the Democratization Policy Council, quote, the Dayton Agreement was great in terms of ending the war, but it had the effect of allowing three semi-criminal enterprises to keep their hold on power. Now, this had lasting effects because those three semi-criminal enterprises that were in power at the end of the war are still in power today. So on the bottom picture, you see political advertisement for politicians of the three predominant political parties in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And these three political parties are composed of largely the same people that were in power at the end of the war. They are what you would call the economic and political elite of the country. And they're now the media elite too. They've come to control all the institutions of media in the entire country. And this relates to this phenomenon of state capture, which is fundamental to understanding how the government works in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So state capture, it's a type of systematic political corruption in which private interests significantly influence a state's decision-making process to their own advantage. So state capture has been a problem for decades in the country because the lines between the economic and political elite are so blurred. They're really the same people. But these political parties, they eventually came to capture the entire media sector. So there's an extensive public broadcasting network, and whatever political party controls the budget of the broadcasting network, be it a TV station or radio station, it serves that party's interests. With respect to the private media sector, it's become impossible for independent media to survive economically when party-friendly media enjoys either direct or indirect state subsidies. So Dennis Zidic, a journalist at the donor-funded Balkan Investigative Report Network, he says, the media all send the same message. They stoke fear of the other and tell voters to vote for us in the name of national interest. Dennis goes on to say, there's nothing called the media or the public perception in Bosnia. It's three different media and three different public perceptions. So the effect that this has on democracy in the country is significant. So for one, there's many citizens, especially from the older generation that went through the war, that are really swayed by this party-controlled media. They see ethnicity and nationalism as the number one issues at the ballot box, despite all of the corruption that they know occurs in their government. And then secondly, there are lots of voters who have simply lost faith in their country. When every TV channel is just blatantly biased and filled with hate, it drives people crazy. So people end up unplugging from the news and they stop taking part in the political process altogether. So, is there hope for the future of democracy in this country? Well, government led change depends on how a younger generation responds to a changing media landscape. And what I mean by that is the way people inform themselves about the world is changing with the increased use of online news and social media. Now, on the one hand, this opens up the door to good journalism that can't be found on TV, radio, or print media. It could also help create and nurture communities of like minded activists seeking ethnic unity and political change. But there's also many downsides. On the internet, it's so much easier to seek out opinions you already know you agree with. And social media, especially Twitter and Facebook, has been a polarizing force in societies across the world. They are platforms where messages of anger and division spread much more easily than messages of hope and unity. So these platforms could further exploit the ethnic divisions that are already present in the country, and politics could become even more tribal than it is today. So ultimately, the ability of this new generation to become media literate will determine the path the country goes down. For progress to happen, a new dialogue needs to emerge that ignores the ethnic hatred that has plagued the country for decades. And ultimately, the dysfunction in Bosnia and Herzegovina should serve as an important lesson for the West, where functioning democracies and a healthy media are often taken for granted. Media has incredible power to build and push narratives, which is why having them all be conglomerates operating as tools of political power can kill a democracy.